freight plane. Hi, my name's Scott Mercer and I live under the flight path and I make a podcast called Gimme Empathy. I'm in the middle of a very busy period. Had a very big weekend. Out 3 nights in a row. Out to see lots of music. I went to a gig last night. There was a fundraiser for the Queensland Women's Legal Service that was on at the Triffid. Heaps of great bands there. Halfway, Tape Off, Tim and Kelly from Screamfeeder, Some Jerks, plenty more. Caught up with a lot of friends there, a lot of past guests, maybe some future guests. And I got to thinking about something that John Wilsteed mentioned in the previous episode. He was talking about his how for his PhD thesis he discovered a bit of a treasure trove of photographs that had been taken on Brisbane's underground music scene in the late 70s. There'd just been one guy who Wilsteed remembered always taking photos at gigs. He was the photograph guy. And I got to thinking about taking photos of things. I always feel a bit self-conscious about taking photos of and with people at gigs specifically. Like bands, sure, you're expected to take photos of a band because they're performing. But there were just so many amazing people at this gig last night, and I hope there's someone out there taking secret photos because I always feel awkward asking for photos with people. I do it sometimes, but my guest for this episode was there last night. This is I guess it's the second in a very short series featuring former bass players of Brisbane band The Go-Betweens. Wilsteed was last episode. He was in the band briefly in the late 80s, and my guest in this episode is Adele Pickvance. Adele played bass and sang backing vocals in The Go-Betweens during the band's Reformation era in the 2000s. So having broken up the band in 1989, Grant McLennan and Robert Forster reformed in 2000 and recorded 3 more albums before Grant died of a heart attack in 2006. In addition to the Go-Betweens, Adele has also played in bands including The Dave Graney Show, Far Out Corporation, and Natives of Bedlam. She's done solo stuff. She's done a duo project with Glenn Thompson. She's an announcer at 4ZZZ Radio. She co-hosts Brighten the Corners with Ian Pound on Tuesday afternoons. And as of recording this in November 2018, I've been playing guitar in Adele's new band for a few months. This chat was recorded the day after our first gig as The Chandeliers, featuring my old friend Ash Shanahan from episode 1 of this podcast on the drums. We've got another gig coming up actually, but I'll leave the plugs till the end of the podcast. So for now, enjoy episode number 46 with Adele Pickvance.
Good gig last night, by the way.
I thought so.
It's good to play bass again in a band. It's been a while doing that for me. That was great. I had a good time.
Could you hear yourself okay? I couldn't really hear myself with the little...
Just.
Yeah.
I thought Josh did a good... He did a
good job, yes.
For the circumstances.
Yes, definitely.
At that place.
Yeah. So Adele, I think the first time I actually met you, you were dressed as a building.
Oh my goodness. Is that the first time we met?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I caught the bus from New Farm in the ZZZ building cardboard box for the fundraiser of the building blitz.
And so you were dressed as the station, as a cardboard version of it.
Yeah.
So you were going around soliciting donations from people at the foundry, and people would put money into the window. And
I know. The funny thing is, because of the shape of the building, every time I wanted to see who I was looking at, I had to lean forward. So it looked like I was actually hassling people a bit too much because they were going, I've already put money into the building fund. So they felt a little intimidated, where I didn't really mean to intimidate people. But I liked it because did you see I had a little dolly on top and a little light as well?
Oh, yeah, who was the representation of Grace,
yes.
The station manager?
And I thought it was good. It all came together quite easily, really.
Is that costume still at the station somewhere?
I believe so, yeah.
So we'll probably get it out again before long.
That was fun.
How long have you been at ZZZ?
I think a year and a half via Ian. with the Brighten the Corners. So, yeah. And that was just by me arriving back in Brisbane and meeting up with, I'd never met Ian and Paz before. So met them, and then Ian asked me if he wanted to come on the show, which was great. And then as Ian does, you should come back. And I went, okay, I will. And I did. And that's how it kind of happened, really.
Where were you before you came back to Brisbane?
Sydney.
Ah.
So I'd spent about 5 years in Sydney, 5 years. And before that was Brisbane, and before that was Melbourne, and before that was Brisbane.
Right.
And before that was Manchester.
Well, let's go back to Manchester.
Okay.
What part of Manchester were you born in?
I was born in a place called Radcliffe, which is outside, it's in Greater Manchester. And I was brought up in a place outside of Bury, spelt Bury, where Elbow, the band Elbow, is kind of famous for the moors, lots of hills, lots of markets, famous for black puddings, famous for being a bit cold, damp and miserable and a bit windy. Yeah, so I grew up there until I was 15, till the family, I guess it was Margaret Thatcher, you know, that era, the 80s, the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, when my dad was made redundant, and the family, we have a cousin who lived in Castlederine. So
was it a mining area?
No, it was more of just an industrial paper mill. It was very damp, so not that my dad was working in that area, but he was working, it's just everything got closed down, really.
Yeah.
He was a computer operator for a paint company, Crown Paints, and just everything got slammed. But around where I live was paper manufacturers and cotton. So cotton because of the damp, so the thread didn't break. So my grandma worked in the cotton mills, and my granddad. So it's quite an industrial world up there. It's all changed now. And all those cotton mills now are all trendy restaurants.
So Manchester's gentrified a lot?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of, because of the damp, they could do the paper and the cotton. There was a river, lots of rivers, so they'd use the water from the rivers to kind of use. And it was funny because when I was growing up, we had a river or a stream, we call them streams, down at the bottom of the garden in the woods. And I remember playing with my brother, and the water would change colour. It would go from purple to blue and frothy, you know, because it was all the dyes that they were using.
Oh, they just wash it all into the river.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
I know. Which as a kid's pretty cool, you know. You got purple and then it's green. It's like, wow, I wonder what colour it is tomorrow. It's blue.
But I guess you wouldn't want to go swimming in there?
No, you don't go swimming, but you do a lot of paddling, and you try and build moats and dams. So it was a nice childhood.
But do you remember the area like being like economically depressed as you were growing up?
There were parts of it that were, especially, yes, in the valley areas where the industry was happening, because that was all where the terraced houses were. A place called Ramsbottom, which is now really trendy, again, being gentrified, and everyone wants to live there because it has a steam train that goes through there as well now. I was in a place called Holcombe Brook, and that was a little bit more like an estate, a 1970s estate with cul-de-sacs. So it was a place where kids could play on the street, and you could play soccer, and you could block off the street, and, you know, it wasn't, it was a bit more modern, I suppose, rather than the sense of an older place like the terraced houses.
Growing up, did you know what you wanted to do?
Well, my family are all musos. Even my granddad had his own band, and my dad's always had a band. He's always played. So my granddad was in a band. It was called the Billy Pickvance the Billy Pickvance Dominating Dance Band. I know, isn't that a weird name? And he used to play dance for the dances in the 20s and the 30s, and then he used to play the music for the silent movies. So he played there with the violin and, you know, black and white movies, and because they had no sound in those days in the theatre. And then my dad would be playing. He's always played gigs. He was like they called them clubs in the UK, like a men's club or a workers' club, or there'd be a performer, like a star, like from the clubs. They'd do their rounds. So this guy would come in, all right, guys, I've got he'd hand over the sheets to the bass player, the drummer, the keyboard player, and it was all sight read. So it was all your classic middle of the road songs, and he'd be tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we've got Johnny Fiddlesticks from, wherever. And that was the night. So my dad did that as well as work. So I've always been around bands and experienced that. So
Did you get to go see your dad play in those clubs?
Not very often. Only now and again, like for Christmas shows. And when I got interested, because I was more into the violin, as when you're at school, you kind of pick up the violin or something like that. And then I realised I was never going to be great at the violin, because if you're going to take on an instrument, you've got, like a classical instrument, you've got to be top of the class, if you're going to kind of move on into orchestras and things like that. So I did the school orchestras, but I got into the bass. So my dad gave me a bass when I was about 13, 14. And that was when I'd go with him to maybe an afternoon gig or something like that, where I just sit at the back or in the corner. But I had my bass, and I just take it along, and I just sit there at the back of the gig with my bass. And sometimes I was allowed to plug in just to hear what my bass actually sounded like, because I didn't really have an amplifier.
Oh, right.
So I just play it as a silent. You could, how you can hear the instrument, but you get a tone, but you don't really hear the intricacies of it. So it was such a thrill to be able to plug the bass into the amplifier that, on the stage, and it's like, oh my God, that's what my bass sounds like. And then I'd have to go and sit down again. And
what kind of bass was it?
It was really heavy. It was a Vox. It was like a copy. It was a Vox bass, not your classic pill drop Vox. It was a precision Vox. Really heavy, really, really heavy bass. Black, nice precision looking bass. It was good. Good to start off on.
When your dad gave you the bass, had you asked specifically for a bass, or did he pick the bass for you?
He kind of just got it for me. 4 strings, the other way around. E, A, D, G, E's the bottom note. On a violin, E's the top note. So, yeah, he just kind of randomly found it. And then my first amplifier, when I eventually did get an amp, was the horn from a PA and a guitar amp. And it sounded terrible. But at least I could hear it. When
did you first start a band?
I first started playing in a band when I was at school, and that was when I moved. So we moved from England to Brackenridge, Brisbane.
That's a big move.
Yeah.
How come you moved?
So we moved because my cousin, my mum's cousin, used to send pictures of himself in the pool looking brown and tanned, and we'd be miserable and cold. So Mum and Dad went, we're going to move over there. So we moved to Brackenridge is where we landed. And that's where Mum and Dad are now, right now. So, and I went to Sandgate High, started in grade 10. And it was around grade 11 where I started playing. They wanted a bass player for the school talent quest, and no one played bass. It wasn't really an instrument that people went for. And I said, well, I've got a bass. And it was like, oh, okay, bring it along, because I'm a girl. See how you go. Don't know if you can, you got to be able to read, just like the chords. I was like, yeah, I can do that. So, and that's where I started. And before you know it, that's where my lunch breaks were, in the hall with the bands, with the boys, playing Jimi Hendrix and all that. So
it was like a rock band?
It was rock, yeah.
Were you listening to that kind of music at the time?
Not really, no. I was more middle of the road. I was a top 10, top 40 kind of girl with the middle of the road stuff that my dad was playing. So all the Carpenters and all the classic stuff, very melodic stuff. So I was attracted to melodic music. So to move into the Hendrix classic rock world was fun, because I could channel what I was listening to. And I guess that's where I picked up, well, that's what we were playing. I guess the school band was playing that kind of stuff. And then I joined a band after the school band that was playing covers. So I started my world in covers. I didn't actually know you could write your own songs.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I had no idea that could happen. I thought other people wrote songs. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Was it hard moving across to the other side of the world as a teenager?
Yeah, because I didn't really want to go. because I was coming to the last 2-3 years of my high school in England. But it wasn't something I was going to protest, because I'm not that kind of person in the family to go, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to kind of say that. Because I was the eldest and the youngest. My brother Johnny at the time was, when we landed in Australia, he was like 6 months old. So it was a big gap. And then there was my brother David. He's 2 years younger than me. And then my sister Melody, she was a similar age to Johnny. So she was like 2 when we came over. So it was a big thing for the family. And my dad we just arrived. So to kind of think that we were going to move to Australia, the only reason we thought we could do it was, if we don't like it, we can always come back. And that was the attitude that we had when we left. But when you when you get to a new country, there's no way you can head back unless you've got loads of money.
Yeah.
Because it's a so expensive thing to do.
Did you like it once you were here?
Not really, no. It was a real struggle to adapt. Number one, I was this white English lass that spoke really slow. And everything was just so... Like the kids that sang out high were all, brown skin, tan. They're skegs. They were really into surfing and sport. And the girls were wearing the short skirts, and my skirt that my mum made for me was below my knee, so I was stinky and sweaty with hairy legs and greasy hair because I couldn't cope with the heat. So I didn't fit in at all. It was really quite a weird thing. And I just felt, you're already going through stuff when you're that age anyway, but I just felt like I was just starting to, in high school in the UK, develop my kind of friendships, that you have from your primary school to your high school, and then you lose all of that, and then you have to start afresh. It's like, oh my God. So it was a bit traumatic. It was pretty awful. And it was pretty tough for the family, because my dad it was a big thing, and it was the Joh Bjelke-Petersen era, which in one way was an advantage for our family, because you could do things a little bit, not that we were dodgy, but you could kind of, my dad was playing music, and we could do things. People would give it a go. You could do anything. You had that attitude that, yeah, give it a go. So my dad started music and teaching, and that's how he brought up the family, because the digital world had happened in Australia, where my dad in the UK was working with computers in punch cards. So it had all changed.
Did you get a sense that the government was dodgy at that time?
I guess it wasn't until for me personally, it wasn't until I started going out. So as in 17, 18. And that's when I started my nursing. So I moved into the nurses' quarters when I was 17. So I went from high school to that. And that's what you do in those days. You kind of start nursing. You live in the quarters at the Royal Brisbane.
Right, okay.
And it wasn't until I started going out when I realised there was the dark side, especially because my stomping ground was the valley, Fortitude Valley. And it wasn't until I saw things where I was walking around these places at night time, and I felt safe. But then, and we're talking about the queers and the punks and all that kind of, and then you look on the telly, and it's this dark, evil drug kind of, and it's the political side of it was just melded into this world. And that's when I felt, wow, the political side of it's really dodgy. The side where I am, I feel safe, and I, got my people, my kind of, the world that I'm in felt fine, felt good and safe. But when you saw what was happening, and the cameras, Channel 9 would go down, Brunswick Street with the cameras on the top of their roof, and you'd see people, they're trying to spot people. They're trying to find the gay crowd, or this evil side. And it was just awful. That side of it, I realised then it was a bit dark,
Were cops still breaking up gigs at that point?
It's funny because that world I didn't know that world. I was more into, I guess because I was living in the nurses' quarters, I was going out, and it was more the gay club kind of world that I was, the party side, the Terminus Hotel, which was in the valley, Patches, and the Beat Club. So that was my world really. So I'd given up the bands that I was playing with to start nursing, and that was where I was going out, as well as the city. I was going out to the city, but suddenly nursing became my world, and I was doing gigs here and there, but mainly with my dad's band, because if they needed a bass player, I'd fill in, because it was all the middle of the road kind of music.
So he found a covers band to play in over here?
Yeah, so my dad had a band called the Green Velvet Irish Show Band, and as well as a band called The Other Side. So I was in the band The Other Side, and I played congas with my dad, and that was a great band. That was like a hippie band from the Gold Coast, and they were doing their own music, and my dad joined that band. And Roddy, the guy who wrote the songs, would live downstairs. He'd be writing the songs, and then we'd jam at my parents' house, because they had in Breckenridge, they have the kind of the rumpus room. So that's where the PA was set up. So we've always had a PA still got the PA in the rumpus room,
So they were a cover hippie band. So your dad wasn't like an uptight kind of dad?
Nah. And same with my mum. They follow the music. Well, like, I think that's the thing that we've always done, is just follow the path where music takes you. And my dad's done the same thing. And, so that was an adventure. The hippie band kind of exploded on the first gig. So they worked really hard, did their first gig, and then it just fell apart. Probably a little bit too much invested into this first gig. And, and then he started more the RSL. Because, those days, before the drum machine came in, they'd pay good money for a band, and you do 4 sets, 40 minutes on, 20 minutes off. You had the musicians' union. You had that kind of world of the musician were empowered, I guess, at that stage.
They could actually make a living just by playing music. Yeah.
And that's what my dad did. He did that and taught during the day.
Yeah. So did you get harassed going out to the queer clubs and all that?
No, because I never really got harassed. No, it was quite a really safe family of people. Even the bouncer would make sure you got home safe. Here's a taxi, I'm putting you in a taxi, go home. For me, and the same thing, for my friends too, I think because I was just reading about this recently, HIV suddenly hit that time as well. And the family, like especially the Terminus, and which is this club I used to go to, probably not that often, but I knew the people. It becomes your family. And the fear of God had been put into everybody about HIV, the dark kind of, no one really knew how you could spread it, how you caught it. And working in the hospital as well, we'd have to gown up and mask up and put your goggles on and wear your gloves. No one really understood the disease.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, like, as a nurse, did you feel like you were more informed about what was going on? Or was there even still confusion
Very
in the
much
medical
so,
world?
yeah, confusion.
Right.
Highly contagious. That was the thing about it. We didn't really know. So that was a big thing for the queer community in all around the world. In Brisbane, a small group. And I think that made the community a tighter community and more... and we partied... When I say party, I'm not talking about party hard drugs. I'm talking about celebration. Like, you walk into the Terminus, the balloons are on, up in the, it looks like a party room. It's going to be a great night. And, you have your pot of cider and grenadine, and that's all you need. When you're young, it's like that's all you need for a night out. That's $2. And the night, you just danced all night. Everyone just danced. And then you get the drag queen shows, and they were hilarious, and it was all a warm feeling of togetherness, I suppose, yeah.
Do you still go out to the queer clubs?
No, not so much now. I think you don't. Well, it's funny because it's all changed, hasn't it? Like, there's no such, maybe there are things as queer clubs, but they're all, it's starting to change. When I was living in Melbourne, you could just go out to your local pub, and that's where you when we say queer, I guess queer just it's a big group of people now, and everything's changed so much about sexuality, hasn't it? It's a lot more compared to the the late 80s from where I came from, where it was all a little bit under the, shan't be seen, kept in the cupboard a little bit. But now it's... So the queer thing, I don't think's really, it's a straight bar really, isn't it? You go to like places like our favourite places, like I like to go to Netherworld and I feel comfortable there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's just an open place where you feel safe.
You're not relegated to these places anymore.
No.
You can go anywhere.
Yeah.
I think there still are like I follow some people on Instagram and see some pretty wild.
Oh yeah, they are
stories.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I guess I'm probably because I'm a bit older now too. I don't necessarily seek those places. Maybe if I was younger, I'd be looking out for them. But I don't need to. I feel like I can find my people without having to go to those kind of clubs.
Yeah. So apart from your dad's band, what was the next band you joined?
My first kind of proper originals band was a band called Torn Sweaters.
That's a cool band name.
I know, isn't it?
That could be a band name today, because today band names are all about plurals without a the, just Torn Sweaters.
Yes.
That's a great name.
And it came from a photo shoot from, now I'm going to have to think, you're going to have to help me here, Scott. The dude who drove fast cars, who was a bit of an icon in the 50s, and he was a movie star. Steve
McQueen?
Keep going. Is it from that era?
James Dean, did he
James
drive?
Dean.
Ah. So
a photo shoot from James Dean where he is actually tearing his sweater and it looks really hot. This kind of,
I think I know the photo, yeah.
So that was the name of the band. But the funny thing is, we got a gig just outside of Toowoomba and the promoter promoted us, Torn Sweaters, as like a topless band.
No.
Yeah, so when we got there, we saw the posters and it was like, oh, okay, hang on. Do you understand what kind of band we are? I mean, we're, three girls playing rock and roll, baby. And no, they missed the point there completely.
Were the
so
audience...
we didn't do the gig.
Oh, you didn't do it?
No,
oh, wow.
We just drove home.
Wow.
No, it was too seedy. It was terrible. They thought we'd be tearing our sweaters off. I don't know what they were thinking. They just presumed a lot of things.
So you did get real gigs with that band, though?
Yeah, one or two gigs, yeah. We played the Valley. I think the Outpost was a venue or something like that. We didn't do a lot of gigs. We played the Pineapple Hotel. It didn't last very long. We did a recording. We used to rehearse a lot of Red Zeds.
Was that the first time you were playing original stuff?
Yeah.
What was that like once you realised you can write songs yourself?
Well, I guess you kind of come up with your own melodic... I learned by playing by ear anyway. So it was just an extension of that, really. It was good. I enjoyed it. We played covers as well.
What kind of stuff did you cover in that band?
The Pretenders.
Oh, yeah.
It was girl rock kind of stuff like that. It was good. With Kerry. I'm still in contact with Kerry. She's a bit of an iconic... Kerry Burrows, icon girl from West End. I don't know where Kerry lives now, but she's still playing music. After that, what did I do after that? Again, it was all integrated into my nursing studies. And then after that, I joined a band called Prodigal Leap, which was another folk band. We used to play the Irish Club. So we used to play Doolies on a Thursday night and the Woodford Folk Festival when it was Woodford. Oh, sorry, Mullaney Folk Festival when it was Mullaney. And Kathy Gall, who still plays. And that was a violin, bass, guitar, drums band. We played covers and originals. Gary Shields was the singer. He later joined Pop Properly. These are all these bands from the 90s who were playing at Dooley's Hotel. And after the Prodigal Leap, I joined the Natives of Bedlam. But Prodigal Leap was fun because my brother joined the band, David. He played the accordion and some keyboards. And then the Natives are a bit more electric folk. And that was that whole scene of the Tooth Fairies, Keep Off the Grass album that was made about bands like One Straw, Isis, all these kind of folk electric pop bands.
It's a really singular thing, isn't it? That early to mid 90s Brisbane kind of weird folk stuff.
Yeah.
Was that kind of thing happening in other places in the world at the time?
I don't know. I wasn't really connected. I guess we didn't have social media, so we couldn't really outsource what was going on. It was when Nirvana was hitting town, wasn't it? And it was like, and I felt like I couldn't connect with Nirvana. I didn't get it. I don't really connect with that guitar, that sound of that guitar, and
like
that
heavy guitars.
Yeah,
right.
Unless it's classic British rock like Queen,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Or your classic, I don't know, my tastes have changed, obviously, but I think Queen was about as rock as I could go. The rest of it was folk, pop, or electronic, you know, like Stock Aitken and Waterman, you know. I admit, I was a real keen top 40, top of the hits kind of girl, you know. So, but getting to know this music, the electric folk music, got me into all the electric folk music from England, like Steel Eye Span and Fairport Convention. So that was a great journey. So, and I'm still, that was great playing the Natives of Bedlam. Lots of fun. We supported Steel Eye Span.
Oh, wow.
When they came and played. And that was so much fun, just to be in the same room, they were great, in the same green room. It was the theatre that was in West End on that near Highgate Hill area.
The Rialto?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We played there. That was a big hoot. Loved doing that. That was the first time we'd probably supported an international, but also you are they're your biggest inspiration band. So it was fun. It was great. We just played everything really quickly. That's what happens with the Natives of Bedlam. We get so excited. It's like so quick. It was a great band. It was 3 girls, 3 guys, and mandolin. Duncan played mandolin, keyboards, and we had a drummer, bass, guitar, vocalist, Marita Mangano, and a violin.
I've listened to the album.
Okay.
It's funny too. Like the lyrics are quite funny and observational. And she sang with a very distinctive Australian voice as well.
Yeah, it's funny. Marita is, now I hope I get this right, Italian. She's a real, like you say, real Australian twang to it. And Evan Clary, who wrote the songs, really pulls out stories from the local area. So we had songs like Brunswick Street and Ipswich Girl, and it was good songwriting. So
were you a nurse by this time?
Yes, I finished my training, and I've been a nurse ever since.
Were you a hospital nurse back then or a community nurse?
Yeah, so working in the hospital, at the Royal, I got into community nursing when I moved to Melbourne, so yeah.
How did you like working in the hospital?
It was fine. I was lucky enough. I mean, my passion was music, obviously, and the great thing about nursing is you can manipulate your career to suit your music or whatever passion you have, and that's what I'd done, and that's one of the reasons why I started nursing as well. So I think I was working like 3 days a week and living on that, and the rest of the time I was just buying basses and playing music and hanging out with my friends. And
so did you have ambitions to be in a band that actually made it big?
No, not at all. No, my only ambition with music is to play lots and let the journey happen, to be available to whatever journey that music takes you on. And that's what I love about the music is even to do radio with 4ZZZ is another journey of where music can take you.
Do you remember, did you listen to 4ZZZ much when you in the 90s?
Not in the 90s, no. It's funny, isn't it? I wasn't really connected to Triple Z. I found it a little bit too punky for me. And again, I admit I didn't really listen to a lot of radio. I was mainly just listening to music that I found. If I did listen to the radio, it was probably, one of the J's, Triple J or something like that. It was a bit too punky for that at that stage, I think, for me at that stage, yes. If you know what I mean. 4ZZZ was just a little bit too out there for me at that time in my life. I couldn't really connect with it.
Yeah, when I was younger, I was a bit that way as well.
Yeah.
It was a bit too scary.
Yes, isn't it funny how that happens?
So were you playing in Natives of Bedlam when Robert Forster found you?
I was, yeah. So I I got a call from Robert, I don't know when it was, 95, 6, I don't know. It was funny because, in those days, you didn't have a mobile phone. It was just a bring, bring on the phone. And so I got the call and he asked me if I wanted to come and have a play. It wasn't an audition. It was just like have a play. He got my number from a friend that he knows, Jeff Erlbacher, who's a sound engineer. And he has specifics, though. He wanted a female double bass player. And at the time I was playing double bass, which I still have, but I don't play that often. And that's how I got the gig, really.
Were you a fan of the Go-Betweens?
To tell you the truth, I'd never really heard of the Go-Betweens before. So when the word got out, I was actually going out with Mark Jocham from the Dream Poppies. And we were dating and I told her, I think Robert Forster. Have you heard of the Go-Betweens? And she was a little like, yes. I was like, because I'd missed it, I wasn't really, I'd heard the song, especially Cuttle and Kane, the hits. I knew their hits. I actually thought the Go-Betweens were a German punk band. That's how much I knew about the Go-Betweens.
Why did you think that?
Because they were more, I think I'd actually heard of them when I was living in the UK. They were more known in Europe as, they were weird looking. They were kind of like, and I didn't really know that much about Australia. Honestly, I had no idea about Australia. I guess times have changed. I really did live in a bubble. And that was just the world I was living in. So the Go-Betweens to me were a German punk band.
So Robert was looking. To put together a solo band for his stuff?
Yeah, he was working on new songs for his solo album Warm Nights, and he had Glenn Thompson. Glenn was from Cow, the band Cow, and Glenn had played on Calling from a Country Phone, Robert's solo record, and I ended up playing with Glenn and Robert. So it was a three-piece. And we rehearsed at David McCormack's rehearsal, like in his house, separate to his house in Spring Hill where his family lived. He had this like great garage, small hut, and he had a PA. It was really enclosed, dark, a bit smelly, tiny little PA. And we just played and played and played and played those songs a lot. So that's where, Warm Nights and that album, Warm Nights, kind of came from. So Glenn and I worked up the songs with Robert, and then Robert took the songs to be recorded over to London and recorded them there.
Were you playing gigs with Robert in Brisbane before he went to record?
We had one or two gigs. We did. We played the Grand Orbit, which was this venue at Riverside, which was the first gig we ever played. We did another gig at David Pastorius's gallery, which was in Spring Hill. So we had those kind of really eclectic gigs. We also played at Scrabble, which was a clothes shop in the Valley. And then and that's where I met Grant McLennan as well, one of those gigs. So he just moved back to Brisbane.
What was Robert like as a band leader?
He was great. He just wanted to play. Let's do that song again. Let's do that song again. And I think that's what I learned so much playing with Robert, and I learned how to play simple and that less is more thing. And as a band leader, lots of fun. And it was, it became a family with Glenn and myself and Robert. So it was a really comfortable fit as well.
I think three pieces are the most familial kind of combo, because any more people and you can start to have little factions.
Yeah, I think three is good.
Yeah.
I've always enjoyed listening to three pieces and three-piece bands, and I love playing in a three-piece.
Yeah.
It's really cool because you can really connect and you really drive the band. Everyone can drive it. Everyone has a way of driving whatever they want in it, where if you've got four, you've got to there's a little bit more, I don't know, give and take. Maybe the connection's not as strong. I don't know. But three-piece is definitely a lot easier to, each person can really input their drive to it.
And what was Glenn like to play with?
Glenn's great. I love Glenn. Drumming is such a shuffler. He's got that real... And it's a real swing. He's got a great swing. A lot of drummers can't swing, and he's got a beautiful swing. And I think that comes from that. He loves that country stuff, you know. And he's not a loud drummer. And that's funny because when I see him play with Custard, he's probably hitting the hardest he can hit. And I always see him, he nearly falls off his kit after every song. You know, it's this heavy breathing, and he does it as a, you know, it's part of his thing too. But he's just working really hard. And again, that less is more, you know, just understated drums, not having to kind of run through the drum. He'd be happy with a snare, kick and a hi-hat. That's all he needs to get all those tones out of the kit.
Was he playing in Custard when you started playing with Robert?
No, so he knew David from Cow, country or western. And yeah, it was funny that's where their relationship started. So no, Glenn wasn't playing with David, although they had that musical connection from that early day.
Were you surprised when Robert decided to go over to England to record the album, that when you'd been working on the songs together?
Yeah, I guess it's happened. Yeah, I knew that financially he couldn't fly us over. That was basically what it was all about.
Right.
So money-wise, that's what it was about. And over there, he had good connections with session musicians, you know, Dave Ruffy, Claire, who played, he had, who played bass, and he had, the producer and the recording happened there, and it was all controlled over there. So the funny thing is, it happened with Grant McLennan's, because after that album, Glenn and I worked up Grant's solo record, In Your Bright Ray, which is his last solo record as well. So again, we were the demo, we were the work up the songs people, worked really hard getting those songs up. And again, Grant took those songs to Sydney to be recorded. So yeah, it was a little bit disheartening, but it was nice. One time when Robert did, he did a gig, a showcase at the Powerhouse. I think it was called The Four
Ages of Robert Forster.
Yeah, and then he did the Warm Nights side, and one of his comments was he regretted that he hadn't asked us to play. So that was a nice thing. We were a bit taken aback by that. Glenn and I looked at each other and thought, oh, that was nice, you know. Yeah, so it would have been great to have played that record because we had such a groove. We had such a real three-piece Creedence kind of groove. We had a real thing going on, and we did a lot of touring on that record. We did a good 3 months tour overseas in Europe, England and America. So we went on the road.
Was that the first time you'd done a big tour?
Yeah, first time.
That must have been an experience.
It was an experience. It was a great experience. It was a low budget. So there were times when we were all in a car trying to sleep because the hotel's not ready for us. We got there too early. You know, those kind of budget tours. But at the same time, we played a lot. I think I gained 10 kilos on that tour because I realised it's the first time I realised you can't really eat and drink to extreme, which I did on that tour, and I came back like a little bloated piglet. So, you know, you live and you learn. But it was a great experience. Had a great time.
What's Robert like on the road?
Oh, he's great. He just does his own thing. The funny thing is, you know, when you're traveling, you know, when you're on tour with people a lot, you get to know where to find them. So you'd think, oh, Robert's going off and doing his own thing. He'd always do his own thing. But you know, he's going to the newsagents. He's going to buy his newspapers, and then he gets to the gate really early. So that was Robert's kind of pattern. Grant's pattern was have a little look in the newsagents, find the closest bar with the nicest bottle of something cold and fresh, like a bottle of bubbles or a nice bottle of wine, sit there close to the gate, just so, or the smoking area where you can have a little fag as well. So, and Glenn and I would be I guess I'm talking about the go-betweens, but we would kind of be the piggies in the middle. We'd be the kind of I'd go and sit with Robert for a little while, then I'd go and find Grant. Glenn would go and sit with Grant for a while and then go and find Robert. So you could kind of have these two extremes of life with the band, but you always knew where to find people.
And when did Grant and Robert start playing together again?
They started doing that themselves together, I guess, before 2000. So it would have been the late 90s. They were calling themselves the Go-Betweens. We did a Les Unrockables gig in Paris, which was a celebration of a magazine called Les Unrockables, and they announced that the Go-Betweens was, their favourite classic band from a certain era. And so that was the first time where Glenn and I got to do a Go-Betweens gig, and that was in the mid-late 90s. That's when we first did the Go-Betweens music, and we did a pre-show at the Legions Club in the Valley, so that was fun too.
Did you think it was just going to be a one-off thing? Or
yeah, definitely, yeah. We did a couple of them, one-offs here and there, and yes, one-off things. I do, though. I took a video camera wherever I went. I documented a lot of things, and I remember talking into the cameras, after the gig, saying maybe there'll be more Go-Between shows, So that was a kind of an off-take of thinking in the future maybe there would be, but I couldn't really imagine it being called the Go-Betweens. But I guess in 2000 they decided to do that. So yeah.
And what was your reaction when they told you they were?
Yeah, it was great. Grant said, "Now I want to ask you something that I hope you feel." Grant's a very kind of, he wants you to feel involved, but at the same time, like, you should, very privileged to be part of this, Adele. This is a very important thing. We're going to get the Go-Betweens. Robert and I are going to write new songs. We're going to do a new album, and we want you to be the bass player. And it was like, okay, fantastic. Yes, I'm excited about that. So that was good.
Was there ever any talk of getting Amanda or Lindy back?
No, there wasn't. I think at that stage, there were court cases going on. So
court cases?
To do with songwriting, I don't know the details, so I'm not going to say too much about it because I honestly don't know much about it. But I know that there were court cases regarding points for the music that they were part of. Yeah. So at that time, it was a kind of a very separate, there wasn't a lot of communication going on apart from through the manager.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
I guess, and we should mention at this time you were also in Dave Graney's band.
Yes, that's right.
How did you juggle all this? Because there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah, so with Dave Graney, I was playing, with Grant, we did a record called The Far Out Corporation.
Oh, yes.
And that was recorded again in the late 90s. That was me and Grant McLennan and Ian Hoggy from Powderfinger and Ross McLennan.
Oh, Ross McLennan, that's right.
Yeah.
No relation.
No relation. And that was great. And that was, we'd released that and that was lots of fun.
That was a really different album for all of you, really.
Yeah.
It's a great album, I think. And it sounds of its time, but in a nice way. Like the electronic bleeps and bloops and some of the kind of almost trip-hop influenced drumming and stuff.
Yeah, and it was created via visual. So we were watching, it was called occipital hammerings. So that was the initial showcase that was put together so we did it as a live show basically, first of all, and it was just the projections of images at Metro Arts in the city, and we played the music to that, and we wrote the music all together. Of course, Grant's main input was his vocals and his singing, and the melody lines and blah, blah, blah. But it was a collective thing, and then we thought it was so good we should record it. So we recorded it at Ian's studio in East Brisbane, where the Powderfinger kind of studio was. And then we did some touring. And then I got a call off Dave Graney. And I'd met Dave Graney because I was doing the tour with Robert. I met Dave and Claire overseas in London, and he got in contact, and he just split up the Coral Snakes. So he'd done all the King of Pop stuff. You know, he was the ARIA King of Pop, remember that? And he decided to get a band, a different kind of band together. So he asked me if I was interested in moving to Melbourne. And I thought, yes, why not? And at that stage, there wasn't going, you know, I'd done the thing with Grant. Robert was living in Germany. And I thought, again, music takes me on the journey. Yes, I can move to Melbourne. Nothing to lose. Why not? So I packed my combi up and decided to drive off. The combi broke down. This is why everything that belonged to me was in my combi. And basically it was just full of guitars, guitar amps, my bed, and a few clothes, and record collection, and my hi-fi and my telly. And that was it. So I had to get the combi back to Brisbane. They put it on a train.
A train, wow.
Yeah, put the combi on a train, and I flew down to Melbourne. I flew down to Melbourne without, this is what happens. This is, you know, flying by the seat of your pants. I had nowhere to stay, nothing. I just landed in Melbourne, rang up a friend and said, have you got a spare room or a spare bed? They had a spare bed for 2 days. And it was like, then I rang up Dave. I remember ringing up Dave Graney and saying, do you have a spare bed? I was so I can't believe I did this. And he said, no, I don't, but I'll ring around and see if, yeah, anyway, I found a home. I was living in St Kilda with a guy from Tism.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Jock, the guitarist Jock from Tism. So I camped out in their lounge room with my combi parked outside with all my belongings in. And I lived like that for about 2 or 3 months. And I studied my nursing down there and was playing with Dave. And then I met Sarah, so we got an apartment together and lived in St Kilda. I was down in St Kilda for about 9 years. So yes, playing with Dave, a lot of touring with Dave and Claire. A lot of touring, a lot of albums that we did. And at that time it was the Dave Graney Show. That was the name of the band.
Had you been a fan of his previous stuff?
Not really.
had you heard it? I
had heard of the Coral Snakes.
Okay.
But I wasn't that familiar.
Right, yeah.
Again, off my radar. But when I listened, you know, I, of course, then watching him and Claire play and getting into their music, massive fans, you know, now. But at the time, I wasn't familiar with Dave and his musical journey and their musical journey together, Dave and Claire. So, yeah, played down there. But like you say, it did get it got hard when, and that's why I had to leave the Dave Graney band, because the Go-Betweens started up around 2000. So I just couldn't, I managed it for a little while, but then too much touring, not a lot of home time.
So the Go-Betweens went to record a new album in Portland?
Yes, yeah.
Why did they go to Portland?
That was the connection with Sleater-Kinney, because they, with Robert and Grant, had done some shows in America, and the girls, I think Janet, had knocked on the door and said, hey, if you guys ever come back to America, I'll drum with you guys. And if you ever want to record an album, I know the great studio called Jackpot Studio. And it was like, that was the best thing that Robert and Grant could have heard, I suppose. And they just went with that. And Portland was the place. So we recorded the album in Jackpot Studios with Larry Crane, who does the famous Tape Off podcasts and magazine that's all about, you know, home recording and recording studios, blah, blah, blah. And Janet played drums.
What was it like playing with Janet Weiss?
It was great. It was so great. She's she's a bouncy drummer. You know, she makes you want to jump up and down. That kind of, the way she plays is just very different to Glenn. I have been used to, because I spend a lot of time playing with Glenn, who's a shuffler, like a real swinger of a drummer. Claire, who's Claire's a real grounded drummer, a very textured drummer, and an intentional drummer. You know, like I don't know how to explain it, but she's a strong drummer in her path of,
Is she like Ash?
Yeah, a little bit like Ash in the sense, although I think Ash is a little bit more busier than her. Ash does a lot on the snare, a little ta-ta, not just a bom-ch, bom-ch. Ash does a little bit more on that. Where Claire is a little bit, I think, a bit straighter. But Janet is, a very bouncy, like I say, makes you want to jump up and down. And that was lots of fun. And she's great to hang out with too.
And so you hung out with with Carrie and Corin as well?
Not so much. We did do a karaoke session with the girls, and I'm not sure if Robert was there. Grant was there. Grant and Janet did a song together.
Do you remember what it was?
No, I don't remember what it was. I think I'd had too many whiskies at that stage. But it was it was some kind of middle of the road song that she was so excited to sing that with Grant. So that was mainly hanging out with Janet. The girls did play on the record and did some backing vocals as well, but just on one song.
Yeah, on
Sure got a funny way hanging on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can, I think, on one or two early Sleater-Kinney ones, you can hear a few of Carrie's guitar lines that do sound a bit go-betweeny.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, they've been influenced, I'd say, by the early go-betweens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you took the album back to Australia and toured it?
Yeah, and it was trying to remember who. That's right. The German drummer toured that record.
Who was the German drummer?
Matthias. I can't remember his last name. It's from Hamburg. And it kind of went okay, but towards the end of the European tour, he kind of got dumped. And we did America without him. So we did America without a drummer, basically.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Was he a bit of a loose cannon?
I think he just didn't suit the band. He didn't suit the playing of the band, and personality-wise, he didn't suit the band.
Right.
And towards the end, and everyone was really tight. At the end of a European tour, the way we did it was we drive. We're not like a band that goes into a van and during the night you wake up and you're somewhere different. We sleep in hotels during the night time, and then we get into a transit van that had the gear in the back, and we would drive. So some of the drives would be 8 to 10 hours. So you get to your hotel room maybe 2:00 in the morning, and you sleep until 6, and then you get up and you're exhausted, and you get in the van, and this is the crew too. When I say crew, there's about 2 people. The sound person and
road manager?
Generally the tour manager is the sound person, and the roadie kind of heavy lifter driver.
Right.
And that's about it. That's the crew. And they get tired. Everyone gets a bit dangerous sometimes. But anyway, so we get in the van and we would drive off. So I think when you've been driving all around Germany, France and Spain and the UK and Scotland and Ireland and all those places, you get tired. And if you're not a good team, people lose a little bit of, it ended up in losing the drummer.
Right.
Yes.
Was that tricky, having to do America with no drummer?
I guess it was a decision that was made by Robert and Grant. They were quite happy to do it without a drummer. They didn't want to explore rehearsing with a new drummer. It was just like, we can do it without a drummer. And that's what we did, yeah. And a lot of it, they would do just 2 guitars together, and then the bass would come in, maybe, 3 or 4 songs into the set. And then we just kind of played the new songs, and the songs play themselves anyway, it was, and we could sing nicely together too. So it was just a different version. It would have been great to have played with drums though.
So I guess Glenn probably would have been busy with Custard for a lot of this
yes,
time.
that's right. So he was with Custard. He took the Custard gig.
But did you record the the next album with Glenn?
Yeah, so Bright Yellow, Bright Orange was recorded with Glenn. That's when Custard finished. So Glenn moved to Sydney at that stage. He was living in Sydney. And yeah, that was a different kind of record again, very different. The boys, when I say the boys, Grant and Robert wanted to record this record in Australia and use Sing Sing as the studio there and do more of a live recording. That was with Tim Whitten, and a lot more experimental, I think, in the sense of the sounds of where Robert wanted to do his vocal and how he wanted to do things and things like that.
How do you rate Bright Yellow, Bright Orange in terms of like the those last three albums?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I guess. Look, I think Oceans Apart is the strongest record, and then the
Friends of Rachel Worth.
Friends of Rachel Worth. A lot of great memories and a different sound there. I like the sound. I still rate. I mean, it doesn't get a lot of great ratings when people talk about it, but I think some of the songs on there are great. It was a real kind of, that's how we sounded. It was, I guess we were just getting the sound together again with Glenn. So it was as it was. It was a very natural record to do. The songs are still good. Yeah, Caroline and I.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. And so there's some good songs on there. I guess it just hasn't got bells and whistles that the other albums have. Oceans Apart is a great record, I think, and the way people don't like the production. A lot of people say it's over distorting. I actually quite like it. It's a bit crazy. I know that it has got a strange mastering
sort of sheen
overtone.
to it. Yeah,
that's really pushed to the max, but it's music. You can do whatever you want to it. There's no rules, is there? So I think it is what it is, and I think it's a good record.
I kind of would be interested to hear like a differently mastered Oceans Apart.
Sure.
And I think that, everyone does love their record, and I think it goes to show how strong it is that even the people who don't like the mastering of it still love it for the songs. Yeah,
I think it's it is the one of the best selling records the Go-Betweens ever did, in the sense of numbers, as in commercial sense, which is interesting. And that's the sad part about the whole story of the Go-Betweens, in the sense of Robert and Grant were really writing good stuff, and Grant was on fire. He was really excited about the I remember when he gave me the aria, because we won the aria for that one. We went to, he likes steak. Grant loves a good steak. So we went to one of those big steak restaurants, not the Brecky Creek, one of the other ones, and wanted to take me out for a good steak to celebrate.
Did you go to the ARIA Awards?
And not that one. We actually went to the ones for another, we'd been nominated, I think it was for Bright Yellow, Bright Orange, adult contemporary album. And we went to, but it was, it's just a weird scene. You just, you're walking down the red carpet and you're just wondering what you're doing there, really, What are we doing here? No one's really talking to us or engaging with us. And we're, you just sit at the table and it's just crazy. It's not something that, I guess if you're the hottest thing in town and you go to the ARIA Awards and everyone wants to talk to you, I'm sure it's a hoot.
I guess there probably wouldn't have been many people from Brisbane at the awards either that you would know.
No, not at all. No. But we were overseas at that time. When we won that award, I think Grant got a call. This is when Grant had a phone. Robert still doesn't have a phone. So Grant got a text off Ian Hogg from, who was at the ARIA Awards, who said, "You've won the adult, best adult contemporary record, Oceans Apart." And we were in, where were we? Leipzig, I think. And the funny thing is we were all doing our own thing, just walking around. I think I went to the museum. Grant had gone to, wherever. I think I'd bumped into Glenn. We always find each other. When you're on tour with the band, you always kind of bump into each other. It's kind of a weird thing, but it's just that compass that draws you back to each other. And I found Grant, I found Glenn. There's three of us sitting in this little restaurant bar, having a glass of wine, celebrating. Couldn't get hold of Robert, and then suddenly this big tall guy walks past, and it was like, there's Robert. So we ran out and grabbed him, got him back in, and we just celebrated in our own way. So that was really cool.
Did it seem like the band was really on a bit of an ascending plane after Oceans Apart and the Aria and the live DVD must have been?
Definitely, yeah. It was the first time where Grant, I think there was money coming in. That was the exciting part for the boys, where Grant was thinking about buying a suit. You know, he wanted me to go. There was a suit shop in West End, and we had coffee, and he said to me, "Oh, do you think I'd look good in this suit?" And he was really excited about buying a suit. So, you know, there was that sense that there was some money coming in, and also the sense of even getting another member in the band, maybe a keyboard player. And we were already working on new songs. And the new songs that were recorded when I did the last record with Robert, which was The Evangelist. So we had some of those songs that Grant had written that we put into that album as well.
Did you get a sense that they were really bringing different life experiences to the music? Because I guess Robert had settled down and had kids, and Grant was still quite, not itinerant, but like he still in share houses and that kind of thing.
That's right, yeah, definitely. And I think Grant's writing was more of a dreamer, you know, and that's what he's more of a dreamer about art, love, all those connections, where Robert's a dreamer in a different way with his music, in the sense of straightforward. How's he, you know, surfing magazines? You know, it's like you can see it, you feel like you can touch it nearly. You know, where Grant's was a little bit more in the air, more dreamy, more poetical, and not fantasy, but just more dreamy, I think.
There's a few musicians, when you hear what they write and how they sing, like Jimi Hendrix, like he sounds like someone who knows how to have sex. He's very sexy music.
Yeah.
And I always thought with Grant, he always sounded like, especially on like 16 Lovers Lane or something, he was a man who knew how to be in love.
Yes. Yeah. Always looking, I think that was his thing, wasn't it? Always looking for love and wanting to be loved and love to love, but not necessarily being able to hold on to it, I suppose, for whatever reasons, I don't know. I know that's what he wanted. And at the end of his life, I think that's what he was getting, in the sense of his last relationship with Emma, and he got that. In a way, it's that the living the life, and maybe that's part of his thing, was that he preferred to still write about it than actually live it.
Right.
Do you think? I mean, I think, you know, I always remember Cliff Richard saying, he's a bit of a weirdo, Cliff Richard, but, you know, he said something like, well, you know, he doesn't want to be in a relationship with anyone because his fans are his relationship. He gives all his love to his fans. I'm not saying that Grant did that, but in a way I think he gave a lot of his love, a lot of himself to his music.
Right, yeah.
And to his day was reading a book, being part of the community, you know, spending time experiencing pop culture. He loved pop culture. He just knew everything about it. He would have, I mean, you know, there was no way he would have, he was just so engaged in pop culture without using the internet. This is before social media and internets and stuff like that. He knew it all, what was going on around the world. So he was very engaged.
Did you notice anything about his health at the end?
I didn't know that much about his drug taking. He kept that away from me, for sure. And I knew, you know, I can drink, no problem. And I drank with Grant, and we would drink. And he'd, you know, smoke his ciggies, and we'd go for walks. And even when we were touring, we'd have a little hacky sack, you know, the hacky sack games you play. And he'd go and have a ciggy and he'd watch us play hacky sack. Now and again, he'd join in, and he was always better than us anyway. And now and again, we'd run around the car park just so expel some energy, do a bit of a run, you know, when you're in the touring van. And he could run fast. And even when we're going for walks around Paddington, you know, I was living in Paddington at the time and go up and down the hills there. And he could walk up the hill, no problem. I never considered that he was unwell in the sense of the heart. But when you look back at his lifestyle and, you know, in the mornings you'd see him and he'd be having a pie for breakfast and having a ciggy. Of course, it all adds up. And he's been doing that for many years. And I think it was, in a way, I couldn't have imagined Grant living a life of being unwell and disabled, in the sense of if he had to survive the heart attack that he had, what kind of person would he be? He wouldn't be able to smoke. I don't think he would have enjoyed being restricting his lifestyle.
In the way that Robert adapted after he was diagnosed with Hep C and he stopped drinking.
Yeah. And I think that, again, comes from that different world of, you know, Robert's taken on family responsibilities. He's very health conscious and exercise, and where Grant was just lived in his conscious world of art and music and his people, his musical collaborators of, you know, he just wanted to spend time with people, talk about music, play music, record music, drink a nice bottle of wine, and that type of thing. Regarding the drugs, there's only once or twice that he's mentioned it to me that, you know, and that's been a safety thing. And that was only once when we were with Far Out Corporation, where he said, I've done something naughty. If I pass out, call an ambulance. You know, and he was like, okay, all right. Yeah. And this is what annoys me. It gets my back up a little bit when you've got people who write about Grant and publicly say stuff about him and his drug taking, where if he was alive today, he would hate that. He would be really pissed off. That was his private world. He didn't talk to everyone about that. Probably the people that he shared the drugs with, he was doing the talking to. But that wasn't something he wanted to talk about to the general public, to his friends, well, to me, and to other people. So, and to his mum and his family, you know. So yeah, I get a bit pissed off when people start talking about, you know, he died of an overdose. No, he didn't die of an overdose. He died of, you know, probably related to poor health and all the stuff that happens to your body when you abuse it. But it was a random heart attack that happened, and it can happen out of the blue to a lot of people too. It was very random.
Were you at the party?
Yeah, I got to the party. Robert got there first. Before me, I should say. There was other people there. The idea was that we get to the party. I was with Sarah at the time. We were driving in to help him set up the party, just a little bit early before the party started.
And so this was so his girlfriend was moving in with him?
Yeah, at Highgate Hill. And I got a phone call on the way in. So I was already prepared. And then, yeah, I still turned up with Sarah, parked the car, this ambulance, police. It was just quite surreal. Everyone's just standing around. Then people started turning up to the party. So that was quite surreal too. So, you know, she just took it in turns to be at the gate to tell people that it's not happening. You know, everyone's heart was just pounding. It was just a horrible sense. There was good friends there of his and ours, friends, that spent a lot of time at the house while that was all happening to try to resuscitate him. But it was quite a scene, but a very surreal scene, because there was a bright white moonlight as well that was shining into the room where he was, and it was quite surreal. that was a massive impact in my life and obviously a lot of people's lives.
When did Robert decide to kind of, finish off those songs he'd been working on with Grant?
Well, as soon as Grant passed away, that was the end of the Go-Betweens, and we knew that. Then I think maybe a week or a few days later, Robert, Glenn and I got together and we just played music. I think that was at Red Star, actually. We just played all the songs. We just played. And regarding Robert and thinking about the next album, that took, obviously, it had to be the closure of the Go-Betweens. And I think regarding Grant's songs, we just interpreted the songs with Robert's take on the songs that, it's I've listened to the album recently, actually, The Evangelist. It's quite a heavy album, but there's some beautiful songs in there too.
It is. Yeah, it's pretty somber,
yeah.
the album. It is very beautiful.
It is, yeah. We recorded that at the same place where we did Oceans Apart with Mark Wallace, who did the 16 Lovers Lane record as well in London, South London. And it was good to just finish that off there.
So it felt like you really achieved closure with that album.
Yeah, I guess there was no plan of... Well, it wasn't like... I mean, I didn't know that would be the last album I ever would play with Robert. I had, with Glenn as an album together of the three of us. We didn't know that at the time, but we knew it was a very... we even had a mic. We had this kind of area in the studio where it just suddenly became like Grant's microphone stand, an area, and just now and again there'd be something that would happen that would just bring you to tears. It was just the weird heaviness, and then lots of fun too, because it wasn't all about that. There was new songs, Pandanus, which is a great song, and Demon Days is the opposite to that. So, but it was fun, and I really enjoyed it in the sense of just being able to just give it all we've got, just put every little bit of morsel of music down that we had inside us to that recording. Everyone was open to ideas. Everyone was keen to try things, which was great. I do think with the past records, and I think this is something that Robert and Grant have carried from, and this is how I feel, is with Glenn and I being given an artistic freedom in the sense of let's try a part, I'd like to try it with this organ, or let's try a sound here and that. We were never really encouraged, or it wasn't something that was open to us to do that. And I think that comes from a little bit of control with Robert and Grant in the sense of maybe having played with the previous band and knowing if someone's contributing too much in the sense of parts and taking ownership, not owning the song, but contributing a style to something. I think they really were very conscious of just keeping it a very Robert and Grant go-between sound. I mean, obviously there's my vocals and bass, and there's Glenn's vocals and drums, and we do play parts on it, but I think, we play keyboards and blah, 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 because but I definitely, for The Evangelist, was more of a open contribution to... Yeah. Yeah.
Because I guess you weren't making a Go-Betweens album.
That's right.
This was a new kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then Robert had a very long gap.
Yes.
Before he made music again after The Evangelist.
Yeah.
And you and Glenn went off to do your album.
That's right. I moved to Sydney because I like to move. Oh, God, this is my last... I'm staying in Brisbane now. I've done my moving.
Was there actually a reason you moved to Sydney?
I moved to Sydney for love.
Ah.
Yeah. For the first time ever, I moved somewhere for love. Yes, I moved to Erskineville, living there. Glenn lives in Marrickville, which was fairly close by. And it was great. We've always wanted to do a record together. We have very similar tastes in music, and we're very playful together. We love we were very close friends, and yeah, when we love playing music, even now we share music a lot. Have you listened to this? You should listen to that. We buy each other CDs and things like that. Yeah, so we recorded that in his studio in Marrickville, which was he was kind of working on that studio while we were recording. It took about a year to record. We did it all ourselves. And yeah, it's great. We're very happy with that record. It's a really fun record. And I think because we had so much time to do it, and Glenn did everything, he did the hands-on stuff, but we kind of mixed it and produced it, and it was released by a German label called Glitterhouse Records in Germany. But it was one of those weird things where it was really well received overseas, but we just couldn't get anything going in Australia.
Yeah.
So, and also I think the music industry at that time really was a bit, especially in Australia, really wasn't sure what to do with themselves. When it was record labels were not sure how to go about things, and so we thought we'd just do it ourselves, but it didn't work out. So we got a bit disheartened with that, but we did a great record. We were going to do another one, but I started studying. I started doing some study at uni again, so I can't do both. It's just too hard. So I missed that opportunity to do another record with Glenn, which was a shame. But then he got into Custard, and Custard's taken off again, so he's busy with that. He loves doing that. Yeah, so that was my last record with Glenn.
What'd you go to study?
Oh, a nursing subject. It's like a postgrad in diabetes management and education.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah.
chronic disease. Yeah. I thought that would be a hot topic. Top of the pops,
And then finally, you recorded a solo EP.
Oh, I did. That was something I had to challenge myself to do that. I love home recording. In all the different formats. And look, I admit I am not a mixer. I am not I love standing in a studio and, tooting my 10 cents worth and saying how I think things should be and arrange. I love arrangements and putting parts and all that. But that record, that EP is something I just had to do for myself. And there's some good songs on there. And that's the beauty of today, isn't it? Where you can just release things and just put them out. And
they can always be there for people to find.
And they can always be there for people to buy.
Yeah.
That's it. I'm not going to put those songs on vinyl, put it that way. But it was a collection of old songs too. So there was a song there, The Light That Guides You Home. Nick Earls wrote the lyrics to that.
How did you hook up with Nick Earls to write a song with him?
He wrote a musical. Oh, is it musical? Yeah, I guess you can call it a musical. Called Butterfish.
Oh, yeah.
And he asked me to be the musical director on that.
Was that like loosely based on Robert's life or something?
I don't think so.
Oh.
It was, but Nick does pull parts from lives of other people. But that was a book that he wrote that he turned, the Powerhouse, he was on at the Powerhouse. And it was good. I got Robert, he did a song for it, and I did a song, The Light That Guides You Home, that recorded at the White Room at the
White Room at Mount Nebo. Yeah.
So that was fun. That was with Scott Spark on keyboards and my brother Johnny on drums. So that was a fun recording to do. And so I did that. But I've never really done anything with it. So I thought we put that on the EP. And then the electronic one is just, I like electronic music. So I just thought I bought my micro Korg, that's right. And I just basically recorded lots of sounds and melody and arpeggiator stuff from that.
So you'd moved back to Brisbane when you did the White Rabbit EP? Yeah,
so I did that at home in my, home studio, came back to Brisbane, released it, and so I've been in Brisbane like 2 years now, 2.5 years.
And then, what made you want to put a band together again?
I felt like I wanted to sing some of my own songs, and I challenged myself to do solo stuff. So I came back to Brisbane going, okay, turning 50, I want to do things I've never done before. And I wasn't being asked to be in a band. Like, those days are gone. I wasn't going from band to band, which is what I normally would do. And that was my trajectory, band to band. And so it hadn't happened for such a long time. I think Glen was the last kind of band, if you call it a band, that I was... I do have a band in Sydney called The Mumps, but we don't play often. And that's like an instrumental post-punk, girl rock band, which is great. But I just wasn't asked to be a bass player in any bands. So I thought, so what do I do? So anyway, I thought, well, I'll start doing some solo stuff. So I challenged myself to do that. I realised I don't really enjoy it. I don't really enjoy playing like the guitar, the 6-string guitar on stage by myself. I've only had maybe 1 or 2 gigs where I felt really I've enjoyed it. So it's such a great thing now it was you, Scott, that I said, you the one who said, if you ever want guitar, just to come and play. And it was like, wow, okay, maybe this can happen.
Well, because I think we had you on the lineup at Rick's earlier this year.
That's right.
Asked you to play with Slumlord.
Slumlords,
which was really an odd pairing, actually.
Yes.
But watching you, and I said this to Jeremy, because Jeremy Neal was there too, that I could just, watching you play those songs solo, I could imagine a band behind it very, very clearly.
Yeah. So it's great, and it means I'm back on the bass. And also, it means that it's the 3-piece again, with Ash playing the drums, which is fantastic. Again, a real pop drummer. She's a real pushing the drum, pushing the groove, the rhythm. And I love the speed, the tempos that she has are fantastic. Everyone sings. It's the perfect 3-piece. Everyone can write their own songs. And it's great. I'm excited about the Chandeliers.
Oh, good. Were you a bit surprised Robert didn't ask you to be on his last record?
I guess, it's really hard, isn't it? Bands are like relationships. I was Robert's bass player from the solo stuff all the way through to the end of the Go-Betweens. Yeah, and longer to the Evangelist. So I felt like I was like the bass player, Robert Forster's bass player. And that's how I felt I was. I mean, I know it sounds a bit weird, but you kind of go, yeah, that's my job. That's my thing. He's not going to ask anyone else to be a bass player, to play bass in his songs. And I knew, when you play with a songwriter for so long, I mean, those songs they're imprinted in your DNA. And your DNA also is able to grasp new songs so quickly, and the direction where he's coming from, and the arrangements, and what he's looking for, and what his vibe is in new songs. So, yeah, I guess it's like a relationship, you do get hurt. I was hurt that I wasn't invited to play on this record, but I knew I was living in Sydney. It's not going to happen. And he did say, that's what happened. And I moved to, we were playing together. There was me and Karen, his wife, and himself. After the Evangelist, we did, I was renting in Glenfalloch, where I'm living now, in New Farm, the old building there. And they would come round and we'd just play like folkies. I played the double bass, Karen was on the violin and Robert on the acoustic guitar, and we just enjoyed playing. And Robert was working on new songs, and we just play them. And then I moved to Sydney. So in a way, I kind of stood on my own foot on that anyway. And who knows what Robert was thinking for the new album. But yeah, I was a bit, I was broken. I wasn't saying broken-hearted, but yeah, I was a bit hurt. But under the circumstances, it's completely understandable and very reasonable that occurred.
Yeah, I've kind of never been in a situation where I guess I've never really left a band. They've always broken up around me.
Right.
And I'm probably going to go through a thing soon. I'll be seeing someone else playing my bits, because Harley Young's moved to Melbourne.
Oh, yes.
And Ash and I were in his backing band, the Haymakers, for years. And, we were going to try and make it work with him
Yeah.
living down there. Like we recorded the album
Yeah.
this year with him flying up here, but I think we all realized it's just not going to work in the long term. And so eventually, like all of us were saying, no, Harley, you need to find a Melbourne band
Yeah.
to play with you. So yeah, I don't know how I'm going to feel the first time I see another guitarist playing these lines.
That's right. There's a lot of love there, isn't there, with bands, you know, and it's letting go. You have to let go, and there's a big heartfelt, it's like a relationship. It's a pure relationship. You're invested in so much into this. You know, you invest so much into music and into the songs and into being available, and your time and your relationships can break down. I mean, you know, I spent so much time on tour. Eventually, it does take a toll on relationships. The commitment that you have, where you could be doing something different, but you're up for another rehearsal, and yeah, and they're your best friends too, aren't they?
Yeah,
You know,
and I guess that like you're still friends with Robert.
Yes.
And like I'll always be friends with Harley, and we
Yes.
still write songs together over
Yes.
Dropbox.
Yeah.
And there's that funny thing because like the next guitarist, like he's not going to know the history in the way that I guess I've taken that in We All Want To. Like I'm playing someone else's bass lines for those first 3 albums. And I've met some of the previous bass players, and it's like, oh yeah, hey mate. And like
Yeah, right.
I can't know what it's like for them watching me play their bass bits.
Yeah,
But I guess
yeah.
we're going to find out.
That's it. And look, for the Go-Betweens, I was playing Robert
Yeah.
Vickers' bass lines,
And
Johnny
Will
Wilsteed's,
Yeah.
and Grant McLennan's. So, and you interpret it your own style anyway,
Yeah.
because you know that's what you do. Because the songs change as time changes. The songs do change. The contemporary wise they change because of sounds and everything. But yeah, Robert's my old bandmate. That's, you know, it's like a previous time.
So so you're also on is it a committee that decides the recipient of the Grant McLennan Fellowship?
Oh, what is it? What would you say it was? It's a panel,
Right.
I think.
And so who set this up, and how long has it been going now?
Yeah, so this was set up by Emma.
Grant's partner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Robert. And it's been going for such a long time, which is great. It's $25,000 now. Anna Bligh was great. She pumped it up to 25 when she was arts minister.
Did Campbell Newman ever pump it back down again?
You know what? Surprisingly enough, he didn't. Isn't that amazing? It's stayed there. So it's a Grant McLennan Fellowship, songwriting fellowship. $25,000 to go to Berlin, London or New York, the 3 cities.
And the funny thing is, like, it is a very Grant. It's very fitting.
Yeah.
But in a way, it's a little bit sad that that we give this to a Brisbane songwriter,
A Queensland songwriter.
a Queensland songwriter, and say go somewhere else. Like the Go-Betweens had to. They had to go somewhere else to succeed, really.
I guess it's not to go somewhere else to succeed. It's more to soak up something and bring it back to Queensland. So go to New York and take what you can from that experience, the people, the art, the culture, the pop culture, the whatever it is, the water, the beer, whatever it is, and use that to bring back to Queensland some great songs that you can record, you know. So that, in essence, is what the fellowship is about. And the great thing about it is you don't have to prove anything. You know, it's not $25,000 to go and record an album. It's to go and experience an
And go and
experience.
live, yeah.
Yeah. So that's exciting. That's happening right now. We're just doing some interviews coming up this week.
And former guest of this podcast, Jeremy Neal, won last year.
Oh, yes, he did.
And then Tim won it.
Yes,
before
he
that as
did,
well.
yeah.
Went back to the
London.
UK.
Yeah, I think it's great that it continues on, and it is a fair amount of money, which is, you know, allows the person or people to just not have to think about money when they're there, in the sense of, you know, it's covering the ability to just live and create without having to think about still an income coming in, so you can pay what you need to pay when you're away from home.
That seems like something young musicians don't get anymore. Like I've talked to people who grew up in the 80s and 90s and stuff, and they could just go on the dole
Yes.
kind of indefinitely and make music if they were happy just living on 2-minute noodles. But I think these days, like Centrelink is they crack down a lot harder.
I know, it's such a shame.
You just can't do that. And like on one hand, you understand you don't want people bludging, I suppose. But
Sure.
on the other hand, it can be such a boon to creative people to not have to worry about.
I know, that's one of the biggest things in the music world that I've experienced, I guess because of being a nurse as well. You don't necessarily work Monday to Friday. You work weekends, you work random. And popping into someone's place and having a cup of tea with someone, 10 o'clock in the morning, knowing that they'd be home because they weren't working, was great. And, just hanging out and doing things together. I've missed that. That was something that, a household of people just hanging out together. It's a shame those days are gone. But, yes, it's different now. And also people rely on grants, I think, we don't get money from record labels anymore. So,
yeah.
You don't get that money to go off and do something, or what do they call it? A pre-amount of money before you do
Advance.
I don't know. Yeah, those days are kind of gone. So musicians now, and it's like a business. People are writing grants as business people. I mean, that's a form of business for some people. I write grants for people. That's what I do, and you can tell when someone's having, because I'm part of the panel, you can read something and go, I get a feeling this hasn't been written by the person that's applying for the grant. It's been written by someone else. But,
So what do you look for?
For the fellowship, I think what you look for is quality of songs, and you look for the ability for the person to really get a grasp of what the fellowship's about. So it's not about going there, finding a studio and putting $10,000 into a studio in New York and recording your songs with the hot musicians there. That's not what the fellowship's about. So if you can write about what you want to do, how you're going to soak up, what are you going to experience, how are you going to bring that back to Brisbane or back to Queensland, and what are you going to do with it in Queensland? Ideally, what we want is someone to go over there to wherever, come back, do a record, and it just blows everyone away. That's what we want. That's what we want the fellowship to do.
Do you think has that happened with previous?
Look, everyone that comes back has come back with something fantastic, and it comes back to their creative world, and they come up with some great things. I don't think anyone has come up with a number one Australian album as yet, but that would be great if it did, because that gives it more kudos for the fellowship to continue. But in the same sense, there's a lot of passion. Everyone who is involved in the fellowship is very passionate about it as well. So I hope it does continue.
Do you think Grant would have applied for the Grant McLennan Fellowship when he was a young man?
I don't think he would apply for any grant because he'd be anti-grants. But at the same time, he'd be excited about it for sure. And Sally's involved. His sister, Sally McLennan, she's involved on the panel as well.
And she presents it as well.
Yes, she does, yeah. And Sal's great. And they had a great, love for each other and great connection for each other. And that's good. The McLennan continues the input there. So that's good.
It seems like Grant really has had like a lasting legacy, like not just his songs, but, there's the Go Between Bridge, there's the tent at Splendour in the Grass.
Yeah.
After him, the award. Do you think he'd be happy with all this?
Yeah. I think he'd be a bit blown away by it too. But he'd be really schmug about it, and he'd probably be, sitting at Rick's bar with his Long Island iced tea, shrugging his shoulders and having a bit of a giggle about it.
If you could contribute your name to a legacy thing like this, what do you think it would be?
Oh, gee, okay.
What would they name after you?
Oh, golly. What would it be? Something silly like someone who can I don't know. I can't imagine what it would be. I think, like all of us, we're all having to juggle so many things to pursue our musical kind of adventures, and that's how I like to think of music. It takes you on an adventure, it takes you on a journey, always open to things. And I think probably call it the open door or something. I don't know. It would be something about. I just think the fact that music can take you on journeys, and if you let it take you on a journey, it's a great fun experience to go on, and you never know where you end up.
Oh, well, I'm looking forward to our future adventures together in the chandeliers.
Me too, Scott.
Adele.
Me too, with Ash. I know, it's great. We've got a 3-piece.
Yeah.
And we want to play.
Yay.
Play lots.
Awesome. Thanks for talking to me today.
Thanks, Scott.
Do you want to play a song?
Okay. I'll play a song.
Okay, Adele, what's this song you're going to play for us?
Oh, this is was the first song I've ever written, called Auntie Nellie. It's kind of a true-ish story about my my granddad's sister living in Rochdale. So she did have a mental health problem in the sense of, yes, a bit of depression and a bit of something else going on. But in those days, they locked them up in asylums. So they were better at the time. I guess the family thought it would be better to keep her locked away in a bedroom upstairs. So that's how it kind of happened in those days. So it's a little story about that. Quite a joyful one. A bit embellished as well with a few furfies. This is the story of Nellie Van Dale. She lived in a house that was dark green and pale. She grew green tomatoes with planted old bark, and she smoked marijuana in the cupboard at dark. She had no friends 'cause they said she was strange. They let her be all alone. So she talked to herself and she talked to the walls, looking forward to night time, waiting for darkness to fall. And Nellie was born in the wrong year, with the wrong type of people around her. She was mistaken in the old streets of Rochdale. Nellie had a brother, a fine young chap, with his perfect wife and his perfect hat. He decided that Nellie should not be alone, so he did what he thought was right. He told her to stay in his house for a while. He helped to move all the things, but little did she know that once she was there, her garden would become overgrown. He locked the door and took charge of the key, letting her out for only supper and tea. The rest of her life it was spent in this room, looking for dark cupboards to escape from all her gloom. She lasted 5 years and then she did die, a sorrowful death they declared. I remember the words, it was for the best, you know. She went crazier as time went by. And Nellie was born in the wrong year, with the wrong type of people around her. she was mistaken in the old streets of Rochdale, in the old streets of Rochdale, in the old streets of Rochdale.
Thanks, Adele.
Thanks, Scott.
That song you just heard was off the Adele and Glenn album Carrington Street that they highly recommend if you can track that down. It's a beautiful pop album. You can hear Adele on the show Brighten the Corners on 3 to 6 p.m. Tuesdays on 4ZZZ here in Brisbane, 102.1 FM, or streaming online. Adele and I and Ash have a gig on December 9 at Phase 4 Records here in Fortitude Valley. It's a Sunday afternoon gig. I'm not sure the exact time, but that'll be really fun. And we are playing along with Tim Stewart from episode 17 in solo mode. I've also got another gig with Tim playing in We All Want To on December 23rd at the Junk Bar. It's our special end of year show. We're doing 3 sets, and I would recommend buying tickets for that one on OzTix because it's a small room and you don't want to get the bus all the way out to Ashgrove only to be turned away because there's no more room. So get tickets for that. A couple of corrections and notes for this episode. The magazine about music production that Larry Crane founded is called Tape Op Magazine, not Tape Off. They have some really fantastic interviews in there. You can find the magazine online. And Tape Off, of course, is a local band here in Brisbane. I saw them play last night and they kicked ass. You can see episode 30 of this podcast with the bass player Cam Smith and episode 43 with the drummer Branko Kosic. The name of the Go-Betweens drummer who didn't quite last the tour in 2000 was Matthias Strudler. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you liked it, tell your mates. There's plenty more where this came from. Check out the archives. If you want to drop me a line, you can email me at gimmeempathypodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at gimmeempathypodcast. Until next time, stay modern. Keep with it.